Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, the show where we take a prominent figure or franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is Dylan DeAndros. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host. He is Alfredo. To my Michael, Mr. Jason Gong.
Hey.
Yeah. So you're going to be an honorary Italian for this podcast, which you kind of are an honorary Italian. You eat a lot more pasta than I do. I'm Italian.
Love pasta. It's my favorite food. I'm looking forward to ending this podcast and eating more spaghetti immediately.
Got the spaghetti on deck. So today is a very special episode. We are talking about one of the greatest films ever made, The Godfather, released in 1972, which means this movie is over 50 years old. It is directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Francis Ford Coppola has a new movie in theaters called Megalopolis, which is apparently a very interesting movie, very artsy, very over the top, and it's not reviewing super well, but Coppola is one of those directors that he clearly views his films as art as much as anything. It's interesting because movies in general are such a blending of entertainment and art that usually when you see films that skew more in the art direction of things, they don't really end up being super accessible to general audiences. However, with The Godfather, like, this movie put him on the map, and it put basically everybody involved in this movie on the map.
Oh, yeah.
This movie's an adaptation of a book by the same name from author Mario Puzo, who he was also like a broke writer when he wrote The Godfather, and this book became like a legitimate like mega hit. This book was selling out like crazy everywhere. Everybody knew about the book before the movie came out. And so that when they were doing an adaptation of the book, it became a whole thing. And for anybody interested, you can go on YouTube or go online, whatever, and look up like the production of this film. Crazy production that happened because they wanted to shoot it in New York when the actual mafia was still a thing in the 60s.
Yeah.
In the early 70s. They're still a thing. The Five Families, still a thing. So they kind of like had to like work with the Italian mob to like allow the movie to be made, basically.
Sure. So like, I didn't do the research that you did. I know you watched a doc on it last night, but like, what were some of the mob's demands when they were allowing them to shoot the film?
Well, interestingly enough, the main demand that they had, because the main producer of the film, I forget his name, Albert Ruddy, he was the one that was mainly having the conversations with the mob bosses. There was one specific mob boss, I forget his name. That mob boss was actually eventually murdered by another guy, like in cold blood, like at a rally or something like that. Basically, they had the producer, like, he brought in the script to them, and this movie's 3 hours long. For anybody that doesn't know, typically like a minute of movie time is like a page in a script. So 3 hours is what, 180 minutes? It would be 180 pages. The script was something like 200 plus pages. And none of these mob guys wanted to read this entire movie script.
That's funny.
To try to find like issues that they had in the script that they wanted changed. He said, the producer said that these guys were handing it back and forth between each other like it was a hand grenade because none of them wanted to read the whole thing. So basically the one demand that they had was they did not want the word mafia in the movie. They thought it was derogatory and they didn't like it.
That's interesting.
And so the producer said, all right, fine, like, it's going to require us to do some rewrites in here, but we'll take the word out of the movie. What he didn't tell them was that the word mafia only comes up once in the original script. And it was very easy to write out. It was when Tom was talking to the movie producer that, spoilers, that he kills the horse and the iconic horse head is in the guy's bed. He was like reading off like a bunch of like slurs, basically, of these different crime organizations from different countries, and he uses mafia as an identifier for the Italian mob, but that was the only point in the movie that the word mafia was going to come up in there, and they just took it out.
Right.
That was it. So anyway, The Godfather is about the Corleone crime family, which is a fictional crime family. Corleones weren't actually a thing. It takes place between 1945 and 1955, so the film spans 10 years. I know you were asking about that when we were watching it.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to tell how much time passed between significant scenes. The only thing that we used to track time was for how long Michael had a bruise on his face from getting punched by a crooked cop.
Yeah, he gets punched by an elderly police captain.
Yeah.
And he just has a black eye in his face for years, apparently.
Yeah, like, we could not tell. We were like, has only 6 days passed since he's exiled to Italy? Spoilers, he gets exiled to Italy briefly.
Yeah, this whole episode of spoilers, by the way. I mean, if you haven't already, and I'm more part of this than anybody because I had not seen Godfather until a couple of years ago, to the point where it was like a meme in our friend group that I hadn't seen The Godfather. I'm sure it's like that with a lot of people that consider themselves like cinephiles or movie fans or whatever. Like, it's a long movie. It's an old movie.
Yeah, it's a tough order. And there's always kind of the fear with these types of prestigious films. It's like, what if I watch it and I don't like it?
Yeah, because that is the case where you're just wrong.
Well, yeah, for The Godfather, yeah.
It's about like, obviously your feelings on art in general is always subjective, but with a film like this, you're about as wrong as you can be if you don't like this movie.
I mean, we've all seen that Family Guy gag where Peter Griffin, his like dying confession is that he doesn't care for The Godfather.
Insists upon itself. I don't know what that means.
I don't really get it either. It's not a valid criticism of The Godfather. So we would also be yelling at Peter Griffin if we were dying in that ship or whatever. The first time I saw this movie, I was like 19, and one of my friends was like, "Oh my God, you've never seen The Godfather?" So he made me watch it, and I ordered a chicken parmesan and had a good time. But I think I liked it more in my second viewing because I knew more of what was going on.
Yeah, it's a movie that almost requires multiple watches because you're just not going to get everything. You're not going to catch everything.
Yep, there's a ton of characters. They're all just kind of like, "Hey, I'm Italian."
Yeah, they have like Italian-American accents. So hopefully you're watching with subtitles because it may be necessary for some characters.
So it's not like a hard watch in the sense that it's not fun and entertaining. But it can be a hard watch because there's just so many characters, so much going on. The scope is really big, but you have to like remember all of these different characters and their motivations and stuff. So it can be a little challenging, but it's definitely like well worth it if you stick it out.
Yeah, and we're always, me particularly, like are always putting long movies on blast on this podcast because I always say like, make it tight. Why do you need a movie that's 2.5 hours long? Funny enough, Megalopolis, I think, is like 2 hours 20 or something like that. It's not super long.
Films, yeah.
But this is 3 hours long, and it doesn't feel like they're dragging their feet ever. It's a movie that has a lot of things that happen in it.
Yeah, I mean, it spans 10 years, and that's a long time. 10 years to cover not just like one guy, but a whole family.
Yeah, so the general plot of this movie is that you have the Corleone crime family, and the Don, the head of the family, is Vito Corleone, played by Marlon Brando. And this is Marlon Brando in like the twilight of his career. He was considered like the greatest living actor of the time, but like nobody wanted to work with him. He was considered tough to work with. He had a lot of demands. And basically Coppola had to like convince him to do an audition because Paramount didn't want Brando either. So like Brando didn't exactly want to do it. Paramount didn't want him to do it. So Coppola had to like convince him basically to do like an audition reel with like they stuffed tissues in his mouth to give him the effect of the jaw prosthetic that he ultimately wears in it. And the Paramount execs like didn't even recognize Brando when they were watching the footage.
That's cool.
They're like, "Who is this guy? This is great."
Yeah.
And he was like, "It's fucking Marlon Brando."
Yeah, that's really interesting. This has definitely become like the role that he's most remembered for. But he was already like an A-lister for a long time before then. It's kind of weird because now we just kind of remember him always as like this old guy with the jaw prosthetic, but apparently he was like a very handsome, attractive hotshot in young Hollywood.
Yeah, if you look at the side-by-side photographs of what he looked like normally in 1972 and what he looks like with the prosthetic on, it's absurd. And it's not a super like complicated prosthetic either. It's basically just like a metal bar with some like putty basically built out like on either sides of it. And he just like installs it like over top of his like lower teeth, like where his gums are. Mm-hmm. And that like protrudes out like his cheeks and his like lower lips. Mm-hmm. And it's like asymmetrical too, which is really cool. And so it makes it look realistic that his like jaw's just all fucked up.
Yeah.
But this movie starts with a wedding scene that we counted it. It's like 26 minutes. The first 26 minutes of the movie is just this wedding scene. And it does a really good job at just introducing you to everybody. These are the characters. This is their relationships with each other. We're kind of setting up a little bit of what goes on with the Corleone crime family. What are they interested in? What are their business ties? How is Vito considered? And particularly it introduces us to Michael, played by Al Pacino. And this is his breakout role as an actor as well. And Michael is an outsider, basically. He's the youngest son. And he is a Marine. He's considered like a war hero. And Vito always thought of Michael as the one that wasn't part of the family business. He says, I'm guessing he says at the end of this movie, where he's like, I always thought that you'd be the one that would be Senator Corleone or like Governor Corleone. Like you'd be the one from this family that would like really elevate us politically. Because the big thing with the Corleones that comes up a lot in the movie is that they're tied in politically. They have a lot of political staying power.
Yeah, so Michael, eventually it becomes clear that he's the protagonist of this film, but he starts off being so separate from the mob family that he's able to almost be like the audience surrogate, where we're able to relate to him because he's not in the mob. But yeah, the whole Godfather story is just his rise to power within the mob and his kind of fall from his innocence that he starts off with in this film.
And that's something that is like later fleshed out even more in Godfather 2 and then really in Godfather 3, which I haven't seen all of Godfather 3, but from what I know about it, it's a lot of Michael just like, he's kind of losing it at that point.
Sure.
And we don't see like that darker side of Michael until the very end of this movie, which I find interesting that they even let us see that side of him by the end of it. And not have a more like happy ending to this movie, I guess, as much as you can have a happy ending to a mob movie.
Yeah.
Because the end of Godfather 2 was like super dark.
Is it? I really wanted to watch Godfather 2 before we recorded this, but it's...
Well, I won't spoil Godfather 2 for you then, so we can watch that together.
Cool.
So Vito he has a business deal early in the movie with this guy that they call the Turk, who is trying to start like a drug operation in New York City, and he wants the 5 crime families to help him with that, and he understands that the Godfather is one of the more powerful mob bosses, so he wants to work with them. And basically he tells them, no, I don't do drugs.
Yeah.
He says gambling's okay, even strippers, but politicians, they're not gonna like it if we get in bed with drug dealers.
Yeah, the politicians, the police. It's also interesting because it kind of sets up the Corleones as the more heroic mobsters. It grants them this sort of good guy status.
Yeah, it's like he has a conscience.
Yeah, which is...
He has a moral code.
Is cool because, yeah, cool mob movies, they do have moral codes and stuff. It makes it easier to root for this family over any of the other 4 of the 5 families. But yeah, he does that. It pisses off a lot of people, and then what happens?
Well, then he gets shot. So anyway, after Don Vito rejects the Turk goes to, his name's Salazzo. He goes to the Tattaglia family and he starts working with them. And the Tattaglias are in with the cops, particularly this crooked police chief.
The one guy, yeah.
And they put a hit out on Don Vito. For some reason, he's out just like buying fruits at a local market with no security protection around him.
Right.
He's just got Fredo.
Yeah. I mean, we later find out that his bodyguard called out sick that day, right?
Yeah, he called out sick that day. Suspiciously, he had been calling out sick a lot lately. And so he gets shot a bunch, and he's presumed dead, but he's not dead. He's just kind of out of the movie.
Right. He's in a coma for the next year or so.
And basically, after that point, he's not really the main character anymore. At that point, it becomes the power vacuum of who's going to take over here. And it initially falls down to the oldest son, Sonny, who's played by James Caan. And he's a bit of a hothead, and he doesn't really seem to like be able to like grasp like the leadership role within the organization. He's like, oh, they shot my dad, I guess I'm just gonna shoot everybody then. Like, this is war.
Yeah.
And he's kind of had to be pulled back a little bit by their consigliere, Tom Hagen, who's played by Robert Duvall. And the consigliere, I believe that's a term that was like invented by the guy that wrote the book.
Oh, really?
As like a person who is the main confidant to the mob families, but they're not actually a member of the family.
Yeah, I know they exist in like The Sopranos as well, because I watched
exactly, like, yeah, Goodfellas or The Sopranos, like any sort of Italian mob story that was inspired by Godfather, because this is like the OG.
It'll have a consigliere.
Yeah.
So the consigliere, Tom, he's not Italian, so he's not allowed to join the mob, first of all, or the mafia rather. And then, but because he was so close, he was like a fourth son to Don Corleone. They kind of brought him into the family, and then he becomes a lawyer. So they kind of have a lawyer on retainer for always, and he negotiates deals and stuff, all without actually having to join the family. I love the role of the consigliere. I think it's really cool.
He's really like the voice of reason a lot of the times here. He's the one that's saying like, we can't afford all out war right now.
It's so funny because every time they diss him, they're like, Dom, you know I love you, but you're not a war consigliere. You're just a guy. And he's like, I thought I was doing a good job. And I think he did a great job. If they listened to him more of them would have been alive.
He's doing the best he can.
Yeah.
We have to talk real quick about Luca Brasi, who isn't in the movie much. He's only in a couple scenes, but he's one of the main like bodyguards and hitmen for the Corleones. And in real life, he was an actual mobster who was
the actor.
He was a hitman and a bodyguard.
What? That's crazy.
Basically, it came to a point where the Italian mob said, hey, if we're helping you guys so much, like setting up, finding locations for you to shoot in Little Italy and New York, we're not getting in your way otherwise here, we're allowing you to shoot, then maybe throw us a bone. Why can't we be extras in the movie or something like that?
Can you cast one of our guys?
And so that's what they did. They cast this guy that wanted to change careers basically from being in the mob to being an actor. And they cast him as Luca Brasi. The story goes that Coppola basically handed the guy his lines. It was like, hey, just like sit over there and like practice like working on your lines for this scene. But he just shot it, and it's in the movie. And it's in the wedding scene where we see Luca Brasi, and he's reading off of a piece of paper, and he's saying, Don Corleone, on your daughter's wedding day, I hope their first child is a masculine child. He's just reading the script from a piece of paper, and they shot it.
I didn't know that.
But anyway, Luca Brasi goes to do like recon basically at this bar that is a Tattaglia bar, and he gets killed. He's sleeping with the fishes.
I think it helps set the stakes pretty high. Like they're like, all right, we're going to send our best guy. And then they send their best guy and he dies immediately. Like the recon fails.
Yeah. And so Michael basically decides that he wants to get in on the action, and he sets up this meeting between him, the police chief, and Slazzo. And it's at this Italian restaurant that has really good veal, apparently, which, listen, finding a restaurant with good veal it's tough.
Oh, yeah.
Veal's a difficult cut of meat to get right.
It is, yeah.
It's a real coin flip if you're just going to like a random restaurant in your town and they have like veal cutlets or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame because it's an relatively expensive cut of meat compared to like chicken, but it's so easy to mess up.
Yeah, you
like,
can definitely mess it up.
If you order it and the chef just didn't care that day, it'll be really like rubbery and hard.
But apparently it was good, and they were able to sneak a gun into the bathroom before the meeting.
It's such a cool, iconic concept.
The only issue I have with it, and I mentioned it when we were watching it, is that the movie does like a lot of setup before this meeting of like, this is how it's going to go. There's going to be a gun here. You're going to grab the gun. You're going to do this. And in any other movie, you would go, well, something's going to go wrong.
Right. The rule of like heist movies in particular, and other crime movies too, is that like, if you spend a long time talking about the plan, you can't just shoot the plan. That's boring. You have to have a thing go wrong. But nothing goes wrong. And Michael...
Yeah, it goes exactly how they talked about it. I do like how in that scene, Slazzo is trying to reason with Michael by talking to him in Italian, and they don't subtitle it.
That was cool, yeah.
So it's like, I don't know what they're saying.
And John was asking you, like, what are they saying? Because you're Italian.
Yeah, that's not how it works, bro. Sorry. I'll ask John how much Irish he knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kills the police chief and he kills Slazzo. And at that point, Michael basically, he has to get out of Dodge because they're going to come looking for him. So he goes and hides in Italy, in Sicily, for an undisclosed amount of time. I think it's like 2 or 3 years at least.
Yeah, he has the bruise for the first 2/3 of the scenes that we see him in Italy, which means that whatever the amount of time it takes for a face bruise to heal is how long that was. And then who knows how much longer he was there.
But back in America, like, things are kind of starting to go to shit a little bit. Sonny's not doing a great job at running things. Mm-hmm. Their sister Connie, she is getting frequently abused by her husband. Mm-hmm. And that eventually leads to a scene where she's getting abused. She calls Sonny. Sonny, like, gets in his car and he's like, I got to get out of here. I got to go rescue my sister. And then he kind of gets barricaded at a toll booth on the highway, and it's a hit. They just shoot the shit out of him.
It's crazy.
And they kill him.
Yeah, Sonny goes down. Yeah, the like thematic thing is like his ire, his anger, his quick to do things, his quick temper is what gets him killed, because he can't keep his cool and think things through.
It's because he's predictable.
Yeah. But really, and John said this while we were watching it, he never got mad for like the wrong reasons. He was always right to be angry. It was just that got him got.
And so this is around the time that Vito Corleone is kind of, he's still recovering, but he's able to like get up, walk around, he can speak. And that's when we get the "look how they massacred my boy" line. That's when the Undertaker comes back around from the beginning of the movie. The guy that asked the Godfather for a favor for the guys that beat up his daughter. And so he was repaying the favor there. It was cool to see that come back around as a plot point.
That is cool. I didn't realize that was what was happening. I had already forgotten what the Undertaker looked like at that point.
There's a weird kind of side plot of all the stuff that Michael does in Italy, which I don't think has aged very well, particularly the use of an underage actress who we see, the nudity of in the movie.
Yeah, that's crazy. Why did Francis Ford Coppola do that?
I don't know. They actually shot that in Italy, so it may be just like the picture rules are different over there. It's really cool that they like actually shot in Sicily proper.
Yeah, that is cool.
And I guess we should probably bring up the score at this point too. The score is incredible, and I think it was an Italian composer that they used for the film, and I think it really helps like make it feel Italian. I guess is the best way to put it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically Michael just goes off on this excursion where he marries this woman who like barely speaks much English, and then she gets killed in a car bomb that was clearly intended for Michael but doesn't get him, it gets her. And that's the point where he finds out that his brother was killed, and he's like, I gotta go back to America.
Right. It's clear that Italy isn't safe for him anymore, and he has business to attend to over there. We should say that, while he was in Italy and getting married to this underage actress, he had a relationship before he left. And then as soon as he goes back, he resumes that relationship as well. So there is another woman involved.
Yeah, if we're trying to talk about like anybody in these films that is a good person, that would be Kay Adams, played by Diane Keaton. Mm-hmm. She's like actually a good person, and she clearly sees the good in Michael. But as he gets more corrupted and he goes down the path of, being the Godfather, she clearly becomes less on board with it. And we see it a little bit in this movie, and we see it way more in Godfather 2. But basically, yeah, he comes back to America, and he immediately re-links up with Kay Adams and goes, hey, we're getting married. We're having babies.
It's crazy, yeah.
And it's like hard cut. Now there's babies.
Yeah.
There's so many children in this movie, and you're like, I guess this is just all their children. Mm-hmm. It's not important. It hasn't aged great. That there's basically no real relevant female characters in this movie to speak of.
Right.
Outside of like significant others of the main characters.
Well, I think there's a rule that's still in effect that like women can't join the mafia. There was like rules against women and gays joining the mafia, but I think now they kind of have a don't ask, don't tell policy with gay mafia members. There was one like really famous one or something.
They just lifted that requirement. They're like, it's cool now.
I think he was so good at killing people, they were like, okay.
All right, damn. All right. Yeah. Sounds good. And so the climax of this film is basically Vito strikes a deal with the 5 families and says, we need a ceasefire. I've lost a son. Tattaglia's lost a son. We can't have this. We're all going to kill each other if we just keep this continuing. So they have a ceasefire, and then there's some tell. I have to watch like a YouTube video, I guess, to understand like what the tell is exactly. But he's able to pinpoint that it was like another guy. It was another one of the families. It wasn't specifically
Tattaglia's.
It wasn't the Tattaglia's that did it. It was this other guy. And that's the one that he's actually going to go after. Next, we see Michael is basically taken over as the Godfather. He's got his very nice 3-piece suit on. He's looking good. Basically, their plan is they're going to put out a hit on all the 5 families. And the tell comes up at his father's funeral. So Vito dies of just a heart attack playing with one of his grandsons. So we really do see the end of that character. It's pretty weird that at the beginning of the movie, we see Marlon Brando, we see this character at the height of his powers, and then by the end, he's just like he's a sad old man.
Yeah, he's lost one of his sons. He's frail and old. I mean, it's supposed to show, I think, that like, no matter how cool this crime stuff looks, at the end of the day, it's all kind of for nothing.
Michael gets the information that whichever one of the Corleone like underbosses goes to him to arrange a meeting, that is the rat.
Right. Any of the crime bosses that comes up and says, hey, the other one of the 5 families wants to speak, I can help set it up, then yeah.
Barzini is the actual guy that he was going after.
It's like pretty obvious that they're the rat. Like if they're like, yeah, no, I'm kind of tight with the guys who probably put a hit on your dad, I can set it up.
But yeah, so Tessio is the guy that comes to Michael, played by Abe Vigoda. That's how Michael knows that, okay, so it was him. So we don't even see Tessio die. We just see him basically trying to like negotiate his way out of things with Tom. And Tom said, nope, sorry, pal. And he just gets in the car with 4 dudes.
Yeah.
We don't see him again.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
It's pretty dark. And then we see the Michael going to his godson's baptism. And then that's all intercut with the assassinations of all these mob bosses, so that Michael's the only one left.
Yeah, it's badass as hell because Michael's standing there and he's like, yeah, I reject Satan. And then it's cutting to all of the hits.
All the murder.
It's pretty cool.
That's the final like transformation of Michael, like his point of no return.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say. The movie also does a bit of setup for the second movie in the form of they send Fredo, the middle son, to Las Vegas, basically to learn the casino industry. And by the end of the movie, the Corleones are moving out of New York and they're going to move to Las Vegas to take over this casino, basically. It's one of the guys that gets killed at the end of the movie is the casino magnate that would not negotiate with them.
Yeah.
Mo Green. And basically, when they're doing the negotiation with him in Vegas, Fredo is clearly on the side of the casino guy.
Yeah.
And Michael basically tells him, like, don't ever fucking do that again.
Don't you ever go against the family.
Don't ever go against the family. And that's something that we see come to a head even more in the second movie with Fredo.
I got to watch the second movie.
Shout out to John Cazale, who, you know, he died like way too young. He's a really, really talented actor. And this is one of, you know, few Coppola films that he was in. But yeah, then by the end of the movie, it's just Michael at the top. And it's clear that he's kind of going down a dark path here. And then he also has Connie's husband killed because he finds out that he was working, at least in some part, with
the tag.
Yeah, he asked him. He said, "Was it Taglier or Barzini?"
Oh, right.
That contacted you.
Right?
It was Barzini, and he was basically in on it to get Sonny killed, and so he had to go.
I love that Michael's like, "No, we're not gonna kill you. That's it would look too bad, so we can't do it. We're just going to get you out of here. We're moving you to Las Vegas."
Yeah, we're going to send you on a plane. He's like, sounds good. You know what? Better than dying.
And then they're like, just get in the car. And he gets in the car and he's the last kill of the movie. And that one kind of feels good, right? Because he was abusing his wife and he got Sonny killed. That guy deserved to go.
Yeah, but I mean, that's The Godfather. And it's a movie that it moves pretty fast for a 3-hour movie. It doesn't waste a ton of time.
Yeah, I think, if you listen to that summary and you got lost or anything, just watch the movie. It makes sense.
Also, watch the movie with subtitles on. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, true.
But I got to say, this is a movie that when I first watched it, I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
I had a bit of like, what is the hype about for this movie exactly? And on this rewatch specifically, it all kind of clicked for me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, this is like on another level entirely. This movie was an absolutely giant critical success and box office success. This unseated Gone with the Wind, which was the highest grossing film for like decades, basically.
Yeah.
This is at a time when Hollywood was kind of floundering a little bit. And honestly, Paramount, it sounded like they were just making this as like a cash grab, basically. They were like, this is a popular book. We're going to adapt this popular book, maybe make a little bit of money from it, and that's it. This movie made like $150 million or something like that on its first run 50 years ago. So
what was its budget?
I think it was like $10 million or something like that.
Oh, it was between $6 and $7.
$6 and $7 million. Absurd.
Yep.
But yeah, if you look on the Wikipedia, you'll see it says $250 and $290 million box office. This movie's been re-released like a lot.
Times. Yeah, I'm sure.
So it's like Avengers Endgame or Avatar. It's one of those movies that just is always getting re-released.
But initially it made like $100 million, you say?
It's like 140 to 150, something like that. Its initial run.
Back then.
And I think they also like raised ticket prices for this movie because it was making such good box office. They're like, we're going to go from like $3 to $3.50.
Criminal.
And like, yeah, they just made out like crazy with it. So yeah, shout out to Francis Ford Coppola and all these actors who made a really, really strong movie. I know IMDb has this in like their top 5 movies of all time. I think Empire Magazine has this as their number 1 movie of all time. I mean, if you're talking about the top 5 to top 10 of all time, you know, it's Casablanca,
Citizen Kane.
Yeah, Citizen Kane. This movie's up there.
Yeah.
It's always in the conversation, which makes it very interesting when we're talking about it in the context of overrated versus underrated. Because how do you say this movie is, how do you say it's underrated?
Yeah. I don't know how you would say either. I mean, it's tough because it's such a good movie. But yeah, when it is in the conversation of top 5 always forever, it is really hard.
And actually, I think, you know, this is such a special movie. I think we're going to tag team the overrated, underrated here a little bit, okay? Whew. Let's do a group project here. If you're listening at home, you guys can join in too. Let's start with overrated. What would be the argument for this movie being overrated? It has to start with you saying that it's just not that great. Like, it's fine. Because what is the letterbox? You said you pulled up the letterbox, right?
4.5.
4.5.
Yep.
So the consensus is a 9 out of 10.
Which I will say is also what Dylan and I both rated this on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I will say I like this better than Godfather 2, which is a bit of a hot take. I think general audiences like Godfather 2 better.
I don't know if that's true, but I do think like film bros will go out of their way to say that Godfather 2 was better.
Godfather 2 is the one that won all of the awards. This one was nominated for 11 Oscars and it only won 3 of them.
Did it win Best Picture?
It did win Best Picture.
Yeah.
I think it's the only movie series that the first and second film in the series won Best Picture.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, if you're going to say that the movie is overrated, you just say that it's not all it's hyped up to be. Like, the movie's okay, it's a good mob movie, and that people just say it's good because it's old.
And because it's The Godfather.
And it's because The Godfather.
It's supposed to be the movie that everyone loves, yeah. I could see that argument. I could also see, like, you know, there's been so many mafia movies that kind of spawned from this, and there's probably an argument that, like, Goodfellas did it better, or Casino did it better, or even, like, The Sopranos maybe did it better. You know, being first isn't always best is definitely one argument you could take. I'll say that I'm a huge Sopranos fan, and I was a little bit more entertained throughout that series than I was with this movie. But I still don't know if that makes me think that it's an overrated movie.
Well, I actually think that's the best argument for this movie being underrated.
Just the fact that it spawned so much.
And not only that, this movie kind of became an art imitates life, imitates art type thing, where apparently the actual real life mob started like actually doing the mannerisms from the movie because they thought it was really cool in the movie.
Yeah.
So the fact that the characters in the film were very like affectionate with each other, like kissing the ring and stuff like that, being very formal, very genteel. The mob started like adopting those types of things like within their organizations.
Yeah, and some of like the nobility rules types of things. I think the mafia after this movie came out tried to be more of like a prestigious organization because of how like cool looking Vito was.
Yeah, and Paramount actually set the mob up with like their own special premiere of The Godfather.
That's really
for themselves in New York, and they were a little bit nervous because they were like,
what if it's a trap?
Yeah, or what if these guys don't like it, and like then we're in real trouble.
Oh, I thought you meant the mafia was nervous, but you meant Paramount was nervous.
Yeah, I mean, Paramount was always nervous, like, meeting with the mob. I mean,
sure.
It is funny that there's, like, literally that exact same situation that happens in the movie.
Yeah.
Where there's a movie producer that's saying, like, oh, no, we don't want to be involved in the mob or anything like that.
That's so fun. That is really funny, actually.
But apparently, I think it was the producer, he asked the projectionist of the theater, like, what did they think of it? Did they like it? And he was like, let me put it this way. I've never gotten $1,000 tip as a projectionist.
That's awesome.
On a movie theater.
I don't think I've ever tipped a movie theater employee. Should we be doing that?
Tipping the projectionist? Like, traditional movie projectionist is like a really rare skill for people to have nowadays. Most people, like, you know, nowadays it's just all digital, right? Mm-hmm. They're just hitting play on the thing and it's playing. But those guys that know how to like actually like clip together the film and like actually work the projectors, I mean, there's real skill to that.
All right. Next time I go to a movie that has the film on film.
Yeah, next time we're in like King of Prussia and we see like a 70 millimeter screening of something.
Yeah, we'll tip them. Not $1,000.
Not $1,000. I I don't think we can afford that unless somebody wants to donate to our Patreon.
Patreon, check us out. Subscribe to our YouTube.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that that's definitely the main underrated argument is that, especially when it comes to these movies that are older, right? The argument has to be, not only is this really good, but it inspired other later projects that are also really good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good mafia films. Like it's a genre that should not be as prolific as it is.
And this was like the first one.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'm looking it up now actually during the podcast, but there was other films about like the Italian mafia, but none of them were like this.
I think there was one that came out a few years earlier and it like flopped. So nobody remembers it.
Yeah, but we're still making like mafia media today. And it was for your birthday. We played Mafia.
Yeah, shout out to Mafia. Yeah. I love Mafia. Did you see The Irishman that came out on Netflix a few years ago? Another one is like interesting. Also starring De Niro, obviously. For anybody who hasn't seen any of the Godfather movies, Robert De Niro is Vito Corleone in Godfather 2. Godfather 2 is basically two movies in one, where it's both showing Michael trying to deal with being the head of this crime family in Las Vegas. And he's doing a bit of like globetrotting, like moving back and forth between places. But it's also intercutting that with like a prequel film.
Oh, like a Don Vito?
Yeah, of Vito's origin story, how he became Don Vito.
Oh, that's really
like
cool.
Immigrating from Italy, coming to America with nothing, and like building out a mob empire. And he's played by Robert De Niro, who Robert De Niro auditioned to play Sonny Corleone for the first Godfather film. He didn't get it.
Right.
And so Coppola brought him back to be in the second movie.
Okay, so it's kind of like Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
Yeah. I definitely know that reference.
It's just like that, yeah.
But where would you say we fall like on the overrated, underrated for the film?
I mean, it's really hard to... I mean, I gave it a 4.5, and the average Letterboxd score is a 4.5.
No shot you're going properly rated.
For The Godfather? What can I say? I don't know. I guess my hottest take would just be that I like The Sopranos more. I would give The Sopranos a 5 out of 5, but that doesn't mean that this is an overrated movie. I think I'm going to stay... No, I don't know. What do you think? You go first.
I definitely think it's underrated looking back at if we're talking about this movie specifically, not the whole franchise or anything like that. I think when it comes to like the tools they had to work with for the film, this is one of those like all-time rare instances in movie making history that they were able to just like absolutely fucking nail it in every possible way. And if you just watch how much like shit the producers had to go through behind the scenes to even like shoot in New York because they were afraid of the real life mafia like getting in their way and pulling like their ties with like union workers so they wouldn't be able to get anybody to work the sets of the movies. Or they're basically like the restaurant scene, the iconic restaurant scene where Michael, kills the two guys. They're like, we want to do this in a restaurant in Little Italy, but obviously the mob knows all of the restaurants in Little Italy, so they had to like work with them to find one that would agree to it.
Yeah. Now that is an interesting argument for it being underrated. Just the amount of stuff they had to go through to get it. Now I'm going to stick with properly rated. I think that people put this in the top 5 greatest movies of all time, and I think they're generally right. I will say like it's probably not in my top 5. I assume it's not in your top 5.
I wouldn't say so. No.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, my top 5, so many of the things are subjective and I just like them because of personal reasons. This is like an objectively... Yeah,
well, I mean, we're also not that type of cinephile, I would say, where our top 5 is, Citizen Kane and Gone with the Wind and
I haven't
Casablanca.
I do like Casablanca.
Movies from the 40s and the 50s.
Right.
If we were, I don't know, if we were 30 years older than we are, Godfather would probably be one in our top 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really good movie. All the Godfather films are 4K remastered on Paramount Plus right now.
Shout out Paramount Plus.
I thought the 4K upscales looked really good on our TV.
Good too. Yeah.
So definitely check those out. Yeah, that's going to be The Godfather. If we get good feedback on this one, maybe we'll do a Godfather 2 episode at some point.
That'd be fun, yeah.
I know we were also talking about potentially doing just an episode on Francis Ford Coppola because he's such an interesting character on his own.
Yeah, hopefully he has another movie come out in the next couple of years so that we'll have a reason to talk.
I was looking at his filmography because I was like, I don't know why I had this in my mind that he was a guy that had only directed like 5 or 6 movies or something like that. He's directed a good number of movies.
Right. He's only famous for 5 or 6.
He's directed three movies that came out in the 2000s before Megalopolis. He came out with a movie called Youth Without Youth in 2007, a movie called Tetro in 2009, and a movie called Twixt in 2011. I haven't heard of any of these movies.
What's going on with this guy? Why?
He's such a character because he's Megalopolis, he's self-financing it. He apparently owned a vineyard that he sold.
Yeah.
So he could afford the $150 million budget for Megalopolis. So he's just one of those true artists making movies.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it would be a lot of fun to talk about him, but I know we wanted to do that initially, but he's just got such a filmography underneath him that it would be tough.
It's one of those things where we wouldn't be doing proper respect to him by just like glossing over a lot of his work. It's one of those things where we'd have to sit down and watch Apocalypse Now and Dracula and probably his early movies. Like Godfather was not his first movie. He had done other movies before Godfather.
Yeah, and we'd have to watch one of his later films that didn't get the buzz that Megalopolis is getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, check back in a year or two at the Over Under podcast, and we'll really get into the weeds with Francis Ford Coppola. We'll probably have him on as a guest, actually.
Yeah, and go see Megalopolis in theaters. See if Adam Driver talks to you guys in the audience.
You have tickets to see that on Friday, right?
Yeah, I'll have seen it already by the time this podcast comes out, but
nice.
Just for timing, yeah, we're recording this before the movie comes out proper. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of the Over Under Movies podcast. Check us out on Patreon as well as Apple Pods, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff. Join our Discord, come hang out, talk to us about movies. Tell us why you think Godfather is overrated.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Or if you're somebody who has never seen any of the Godfather movies, I'm curious like what your thoughts are on them, like your perception.
Yeah, me
somebody
too.
that hasn't seen them before.
I'd definitely be curious as to like what a young person's thoughts are on The Godfather, like a 22-year-old non-cinephile, what they think of the movie, or just like someone who only goes to see Marvel movies. I want to know what you think of The Godfather.
But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of the Over Under Movies podcast. We will see you at the movies. Bye.
Adios.
No, it's leave the gun, take the canoe with.